In the summer of 1324, merchants in Cairo noticed something strange. Gold, the currency that ran the entire Mediterranean world, had suddenly lost its value. Prices of goods doubled, then tripled. Traders who had been wealthy for generations found themselves ruined almost overnight. This economic collapse would last 12 years. It wasn't caused by a plague. It wasn't caused by a war. It was caused by one man who was simply passing through. His name was Mansa Musa I. Mansa, a word that means King of Kings. He ruled the Mali Empire, a civilization so vast it covered nearly all of West Africa, an empire larger than Western Europe, an empire that sat on top of the richest gold and salt deposits the ancient world had ever known. Historians today estimate his personal wealth at somewhere between 400 and 415 billion US dollars. That makes him not Elon Musk, not Jeff Bezos, not the Rockefellers, the single wealthiest human being who has ever lived. And yet, most people in the world cannot tell you his name. To understand Mansa Musa, you first have to understand what the Mali Empire actually was. Because in 1312, the year Musa took the throne, Europe was in the middle of what historians call the Great Famine. Cities were collapsing, people were starving, the continent was being ravaged by disease. Meanwhile, in West Africa, the Mali Empire had universities. Timbuktu, a city you have probably only heard mentioned as a joke, as a place so remote it barely exists, was in reality one of the most advanced cities on earth. It had over 180 Quranic schools. It had a university, Sankore, that attracted scholars from across Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. At its peak, 25,000 students studied there. The empire controlled the trans-Saharan trade routes. Every grain of gold, every block of salt that moved between sub-Saharan Africa and the Mediterranean world passed through Mali. Musa did not inherit a poor kingdom and get lucky. He inherited the most sophisticated economic empire of his era. In 1324, Mansa Musa decided to make the Hajj, the Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca. Now, when most kings made this journey, they traveled with a small retinue, a few hundred soldiers, some supplies. Musa brought 60,000 people. His personal entourage alone, just the people walking directly around him, numbered 12,000, each one dressed in Persian silk, each one carrying a golden staff. Ahead of him walked 500 heralds, men whose only job was to announce his arrival, each carrying a staff of pure gold, weighing nearly 3 kilograms. And behind all of them came 80 camels, each camel carrying between 50 and 135 kilograms of gold dust. He gave this gold away freely to the poor on the roadside, to mosques, to rulers he met along the way. In Cairo, he spent and gave away so much gold in just 3 months that the local gold market collapsed and did not recover for 12 years. He didn't mean to cause a financial crisis. He was just being generous. After his pilgrimage, Musa returned home and built. He brought back architects from the Arab world. He expanded the mosques of Timbuktu. He commissioned libraries. He created a bureaucratic system so organized that the Mali Empire functioned smoothly for generations after his death. European cartographers, the men who drew the maps of the known world, were so stunned by what travelers reported about him that for nearly a century after his death, every major map of Africa featured his image. He was not a footnote. He was a centerpiece. So, what happened? The transatlantic slave trade happened. As European powers began colonizing Africa in the centuries that followed, a narrative emerged, one that required Africa to be seen as primitive, as undeveloped, as a place without history or civilization. Because you cannot justify enslaving a people whose kings controlled the global gold supply. You cannot justify colonizing a continent whose universities predated your own. So the story of Mansa Musa, along with hundreds of others like it, was quietly, deliberately removed. Here is why the story of Mansa Musa matters right now, in 2025. The countries that made up the Mali Empire, Mali, Senegal, Guinea, Burkina Faso, are today among the poorest nations on earth. The gold is largely gone. The trade routes were redirected. The institutions were dismantled. But the knowledge of what existed there, the proof that Africa produced the richest civilization and the wealthiest ruler in human history, that knowledge never left. It was just hidden. Because history is not just a record of what happened, it is a tool. And for centuries, that tool was used to erase people who had every reason to stand tall. Mansa Musa did not need anyone's validation. He was so wealthy that his generosity accidentally broke an entire region's economy for over a decade. The question is not whether he was great. The question is, who else was erased? And what do we find when we go looking? This is Echo of Ages. Every week, we go back into history and find what was left out. The figures they erased, the empires they minimized, the events that were rewritten. If this story made you feel something, share it. Because the best way to restore a history that was taken away is to make sure as many people as possible hear it. And next time on Echo of Ages, the city of Timbuktu, at its peak, it had more books than any city in Europe. Scholars came from across the known world to study there. Then one day, an army arrived, and 700,000 manuscripts vanished. Some of them are still being found today. That story, next week.